Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We have a short episode for you today and a really interesting one. We have a man who claims to have listened to Film Study in the most countries of anybody, more than 40, he says. He's a Swedish clinical psychologist. He's a master's in psychology. Rasmus Larsson is joining us. Rasmus, how are you doing?
I am doing very well, and thank you for having me, Ken.
I appreciate you coming on. And the topic today, we're going to be talking about Jesse Minter, and Rasmus is going to talk about some of the things he's heard from Jesse. And I know we're all in very much a honeymoon phase with this new head coaching staff, with the new coaching staff in general, with Minter, with all the hires. The excitement is very high. It's definitely, there's a lot of new stuff. There seems to be a lot of embracing of the old as well. But Rasmus has some thoughts, and they're not all positive. He has some questions that have arisen out of things he's heard from Jesse so far. So Rasmus, I'm going to kick it over to you. And we kind of talked about whether good news or bad news should come first. And I hope we'll get to the good news, but you want to start with the bad news. So let's go through that and talk about some of the things you've heard from Jesse and how you interpret them.
Well, I think you can just start off with saying that overall, I think Jesse Minter is a fantastic hire as a new football coach, without a doubt. I think the thing that piqued my interest from a psychological perspective is the fact that when the team is more mature than its leader, than its new leader, and I think that is very much the case for the Ravens of 2026. We have a veteran team, a senior team, some may even say. Our quarterback, I think this is year 8 for him.
9.
We have a 9 even, my bad. We have a deeply established culture. Been there for 18 years with John Harbaugh. And we also have some newly fresh wounds for our organization of some pretty heartbreaking losses over the past few years. Mm-hmm. So this is a team that has already built their identity, that has shared both glory and failure, which both brings a team together. It establishes roles, expectations, etc. And Jesse Minter is coming in as a new piece in that. And okay. There is some...
I hear you, and of course Minter is older than any player, but you don't really mean old in that regard. He's new to coaching, whereas these players are old to playing.
Yeah, relatively speaking to the team as it is today, exactly. And so the fascinating thing I think about this, and I mean, which is why this was such a fascinating hire to begin with, or rather firing, maybe one should say, because this team is not looking for. It's not looking for a new direction. It's not looking for a restart. It's essentially just Baltimore Ravens was just essentially looking to become a little bit better, a tiny bit better in critical situations in the grand scheme of things, since we've been so close. And on that note, I've walked back and watched a ton of interviews and press conferences with Jesse Minter, both, of course, since he became a Raven, but also previous to that. And I just wanted to give like a little bit of time lapse into how he presents himself to media and to fans, which I think is fascinating, and it shows a little bit of him as a person, as well as what. Oh, go ahead.
I'm fascinated to hear this. Maybe start with some examples. You mentioned a time lapse, so you've got stuff from when he was with the Chargers, maybe even before that, or is it all starting with this time with the Chargers?
So the media available it started to pop up when he became the DC of the Chargers. From Michigan, there are a few things, but not at all as much, and it's not as easy to find. So primarily it's from the Charger, and of course it ramped up even more when he became the head coach for us. But just from the Charger, I think the main thing to take away, which is interesting in his development. I think you've heard about I think we've all heard about his emphasis these days on what is it that he said? Best when our best is needed. Mm-hmm. Which is something. So it's something I was looking into. Is this a mantra he's always had? Is this the mentality that he's always sort of pushed for his defenses or for his team? It is not. It's something new that popped up when it came to the Ravens, which I think it becomes very clear to me that it it happened in a discussion probably with Bishotti and Di Costa that it's something that our team and franchise needed. We need to be better when our best is needed. And so I think that is something he adapted from that, and it's something that our fans wants to hear.
Okay, so you're absolutely 100% correct. I'm sure that is a reaction to the Ravens' lack of success in some key moments and in the playoffs in particular, which is really the reason why Harbaugh got hired. Harbaugh got fired, I should say. But in the case of Minter, is there anything we can take from this? Because it sounds like the best when the best is needed sounds like any number of not even mission statements. It would be like a key points or something that a corporation would have. Is there anything I should take from that before I see action on it?
Honestly, hand to heart, from my observation, I'll say no, just intuitively. I think it's a great thing. Here's my take on it, my perception of it. The fans were screaming for us to be better when it's needed. I think the organization, the team was as a whole. I think that is what they were looking for. I think they were very intentional in like saying, okay, this is what we need to do. So I think it's a reaction to that. Fair enough. I don't buy into it whatsoever. And it also leads me to the next point. I think I was very happy when I was listening to one of your episodes earlier, 1, 2, 3 weeks ago, something, when you brought up the fact about the medicine ball, the throwing in the end, and how Coach Minter used that game to say that, to give an example that be the best when our best is needed, which I reacted quite negatively to, I must say. And I think you had a good conversation about this on the episode, but I think it's actually worth diving more into a little bit at least. And it's hard to sit and criticize it fundamentally, but I think it is worth criticizing. And I think this is the single thing that, for me, where he kind of missed the point quite excessively to a large degree, standing there, because of course what this does is you sort of lose the message. You sort of misses the entire message, the meaning of when our best is needed. Our best is not needed at practice. It's not needed with a medicine ball. It is not needed in the preseason. And I think, so what I think this shows is, I remember super vividly from Hard Knocks many years ago. I remember when Bill Belichick stood in front of his team saying in a preseason game, making it very clear to his players, a preseason game is not the Super Bowl. It is not even the regular season game. It does not matter to any one of you. But it matters if you want to make the team. If you're a third, fourth stringer, then it matters. It matters if you want to improve on technique, then it matters. But making sure to identify what is what. And I think Coach Minter did not do that originally.
Right. I agree. And I think he used it as kind of a platform to further that mantra without it being a good example. And what he should have said, and what it truly is for the players, is it's a great opportunity for the players to bond in a way at the end of practice and to compete in a way in a practice that they can't compete very much. I mean, they have basically this patty cake offensive line, defensive line play. It's not hard and physical. It's not a padded practice. And to a lot of players, that probably seems kind of slow, and particularly the offensive defensive line, they don't do that much. But this kind of thing is competitive, and I mean, they care about it, and they jump all over it. But it's the worst possible example of the best when the best is needed. I completely agree.
Yeah, of course. And as you say, I mean, there's nothing wrong with using a game and using competitiveness when they cannot really be competitive at practice. It's a fantastic thing. But to me, I think it's one of those things where there's a slight disconnect between a very mature team and a quote unquote immature coach. And I'm not saying that he's immature as a person, as a leader, as a coach, but again, relatively speaking, to simple years in the situation, unseasoned. I think it's fair to say unseasoned. Thank you. So I think that this is one of those tests where he sort of jumps the gun a little bit and wants to push this narrative right away. And I think it misses the target. I'm just, I'm also sitting thinking, like, say, Derrick Henry, for example, he comes from Coach Saban, Coach Vrabel, Coach Harbaugh, and now to Coach Minter, which is a difference in like the way to the leadership style. And so I think my guess would be that sort of hits a bit wrong. Not too much, hopefully, but I think it's worth highlighting at least.
I think it's also fair to say the mature players we're talking about. Derrick Henry's a great example. Calais Campbell's a great example. Any of the guys, Ronnie Stanley is a great example. They're going to be the most. They've heard multiple mission statements in their careers from college on, and even the ones who played with the Ravens for their entire careers under Harbaugh. They still hear multiple mission statements from Harbaugh as the "Here we are" mission statement after the 2013 season, for example. I think all of those guys understand. Look, talk's cheap. Show me what we're going to be doing on the field.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I mean, if it is fundamentally, philosophically, a huge difference in just a shift from Harbaugh to Minter. It really is from Harbaugh to Harbaugh's method of really like almost, how to put it, filling you with the spirit sort of, and talking about Lamar like changing the game forever. Like Harbaugh really puts those expectations like high and loud to the public, and so. But Minter is different there, which is also like, it's very interesting. If you listen to his interviews and his press conferences, have you caught up on like what Coach Minter's like primary when he wants to, how to put it, when he wants to praise someone? His adjective
I certainly, there were little cues with Harbaugh, that's for sure, over the years that he would, he had his regular coach speak tone, and then he would go into a higher gear to talk about people, and he'd often alliterate or he'd pick out some very specific thing that he really liked, and he'd go over the top. But tell me what you see from Minter.
So the thing with Minter is super interesting, which is ironical, and I think it's super good talking point. So Coach Minter's thing, when he really lifts up people, both coaches and players, he talks about leadership. So he can go on a rant about tons of different adjectives, but then he concludes it always saying he's a leader. So that's sort of his primary thing, which is very interesting to me. And I think it's a super good thing, because Jesse Minter as a leader in the typical sense and what we're used to is also something new for the Ravens, having had Harbaugh for as many years. Minter is not that typical type of leader, I would say, from my observation. He is quote unquote softer. He is more on good terms. He wants to have a pleasant environment. I think EDC talks a lot about when they introduced him, like that Minter's ability to create and form and bond relationships. I think that's entirely true, but also even a people pleaser focuses a lot on relationships. Like there's 1,000 different ways you can focus on relationships, and I think it's evident, of course, that Jesse Minter is not the authoritative type in that sense. He doesn't create a lot of friction, put it that way. I think what Harbaugh did was Harbaugh created friction in a lot of sense, but he was also good at handling the friction and making people grow. What I see from Minter thus far, I think he is bonding in a different way. I think it's a lot of positive affirmation. I think it's bonding in a very smooth and soft way. I also, again, think it's important as for an unseasoned leader into a more like seasoned team. I think that's the way you have to go about it.
Okay, juxtapose something you recall from the Harbaugh era that would have been a friction-creating moment, as you would describe it, that I can think of one, perhaps, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, that something that would naturally create friction that he thought he could use.
Well, I remember at the very early on, the onset, I mean, his Harbaugh's relationship with, I guess, primarily Ed Reed, as well as who's the other safety, Pollard later. I think, of course, this is behind the scenes, so this is sort of just like reading from the fallout of things. But I think Harbaugh steps in with, I think he makes clear what he wants. And I think he also aims sometimes to create friction. And that is not a bad thing as a leader, to create friction. That is a super healthy thing as long as you know how to nurture it later. Do you have any more concrete example, more recent? Then please.
Yeah, the example that I would think of, and this happened all during the Harbaugh era, but I think he would kind of overpromise at the risk of under-delivering on behalf of the players returning from injury. And he thought it would almost be something that he could push a player to return from injury more quickly by saying he's going to be ready. I'm sure he'll be ready to play next week, kind of thing. And then the player wouldn't be, and you'd have fans upset about it, and they'd consider Harbaugh lying, and then they'd also, at times there's been all sorts of unnecessary vitriol spewed at Lamar over this. And I think that was unfair, and is in a lot of ways was a function of Harbaugh's communication style.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm super interested to see how Minter would deal specifically with the injury situation. My hope is that he will simply say, I don't know, we'll see, without diving into it anything more, because you don't need to. I'm sure there are positive things. It's just sometimes you can motivate, etc. But there are so many risks with it.
Yep.
Like the risk return ratio is so huge. I really hope he'll just leave it to it, and that he'll stick to that as a principle. He did update recently, the last press conference, and I think he did fairly neutral and just said we'll wait and see. But I mean, that's going to be harder. Say if Lamar is out for a few weeks, I mean, when the pressure is really, really ramped up on giving updates, that he'll actually stick to that. Hopefully.
Yeah. So he definitely, in my mind, I tried to get this out of him at the last press conference. I asked, it's the second to last, I guess. I asked him, how are you going to respond to injury questions, kind of thing. And he said, well, I think during the regular season, the injury report speaks for himself. He hasn't confirmed. That's talk. He can't still convince me that he's going to be one communicative way until he actually does it. And that was the problem with Harbaugh. Harbaugh wanted to give you one-sided positive injury news and not give you, if it was negative, then he'd shut up, and he'd say he'd have to shut up. But the problem is, if you give the positive news on the other side, or positive expectation on the other side, then it means you've got a negative prognosis on anybody you're not willing to talk about. And I just don't think that's a good idea. Coming from the M&A world, our only comment is no comment is really the best way. It's a kind of surly Belichick at the podium is what I'd like to see from him. I don't know if he'll do that. I don't know if he's really willing to do that with the media, but he should be. I mean, the media are not they're not his friends. They're there to report the story as best he gives them, and he should be representing the Baltimore Ravens in the way that is best.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's such a Pandora's box. I mean, if you say one thing, then everything is just falls apart. So you really need from day one. So I'm glad to hear, you need from day one, just say injury report and that's it. And then just stick to that. I mean, there's no going back. Otherwise it'll be very hard to go back from saying just A without saying B, etc. and then sticking to that. But yeah, hopefully. Okay. So
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
Okay, no, but so those were, I think the two primary thing was regarding him was the sort of not being as seasoned, which is not his fault by any means, and the fact of misfiring a little bit on best when our best is needed. And I think it clearly shows that he's still trying to find his footing. He's still trying to find his identity as a head coach, which is entirely fair. I think there is a lot of positive things with him. Obviously, otherwise they wouldn't have hired him. I also think that when you listen to Coach Minter in interviews and press conference, he is more, how to put it, he's more willing to please and be kind and soft than when you compare him to the small tidbits we've gotten from the interview with De Costa and the rest of the guys. I think he's more firm there in the way he presents himself, in the way he talks. He's more decisive. I think is a really good thing. So I think behind the scenes, that's also more of a leader, more type of leader that he'll be, strong and assertive in that sense. I think it's a super good pedagogically speaking. I think he's very good. I think he's a teacher at his heart. I think you can tell both when he talks to media, fans, but also to his players. He's very meticulous. He is very detail-oriented. I think that's a super positive thing. And I think that's why it was brought in, just to make the players a little bit better. I also think he has a nice self-awareness, because judging from my observation, I think that Well, as I said earlier, there are questions regarding him as a leader, especially leader to a mature and seasoned team, which is why he also pushes the fact of there needs to be strong leaders around him. He is very strong in creating a player-led team, as well as hiring coaches with quite strong personalities.
Now, I love that. I love that part in two ways. First of all, player-led team. The one key element of that is something I picked up from Bill James a number of years ago. And he used to say, the best leadership comes from the best players. So I think if you put a player to be in a leadership position that's going to be with you long team, Kyle Hamilton being the leader of the defense makes all kinds of sense.
Yeah.
It's not as good a risk right now, and he will be this in some sense, to have Marlon Humphrey be the leader of the defense. We don't know how long Marlon Humphrey's going to be around. He didn't play particularly well last year. He's a player who might have to undergo a positional change, and you don't want to create an us versus them situation there with the players. But the concept you're talking about was true with Harbaugh as well when he was last season. He came on in 2008 with the Ravens, and Rex Ryan was still there and was a much more seasoned defensive coordinator. And a lot of people thought, including Ray Lewis, that Rex Ryan should have gotten the job. And he did, of course, get hired the next year by the Jets to take over. But during that after the 2008 season, in fact, Ray Lewis said, it wasn't John Harbaugh as a coach of that team, it was Rex Ryan. Well, you want to undercut your coach. That's a good way to do it. And I don't know that there is. In fact, I think I would definitely say there is not that coach currently on the Ravens who would undercut Minter in that way right now.
No, neither coach nor player.
Right.
I'd say. Yeah. And also I think that Ray Lewis thing, I think that's I'm just guessing now, speculating, but I would interpret that as a sort of reciprocal. You give what you get what you give a little bit, that iron sharpens iron, because I think Harbaugh again came in with okay, so this is also very, very interesting. So if you go back to the hiring of John Harbaugh, I remember what Steve Bisciotti was talking about, what really sold Harbaugh to him, one of many things, I'm sure. But the way they conceptualized it was that Harbaugh said, when they asked Harbaugh to list the three most important things. And Harbaugh listed the team. And that really impressed Steve Bisciotti. Of course, he delved into much more detail. So with Jesse Minter, as with what we've seen right now, it's very interesting that I think Harbaugh had a clear vision, sort of. He is much more of a visionary. He is that type of leader to begin with, to inspire, to fill you up, to motivate, so that he can throw out these like things just like that. Is also on brand to him as a person. I think Jesse Minter, when asked, the thing we get to hear from that interview is he talks about the difference in expectations and standards, and sort of dives into that a little bit, why he feels that standards is more important than expectations, but he doesn't give that clear inspirational. You look confused.
No, I'm trying to maybe talk to me a little bit about your interpretation of the difference between standards and expectations, first of all.
So I can give you exactly what Coach Minter said about it. He made the point that I do not want to, paraphrasing, he does not want to build a team based on expectations, because expectation is something loose. It's something that you hope to achieve that will hopefully come to happen, while standard is more concrete, and standard says this is how we do it. So that's his message. And I think that's fair. But it's also interesting because with Jesse Minter is less of a clear vision, I think, than Harbaugh had coming in. Again, they're two different type of coaches. I think Jesse is coming in and more adapting to the situation, to the team, to the established culture. And I think that's a really, really good thing. But it also gives reason to question things or to highlight things as well. It's something new, and a team will eventually need to be a strong leader. Because so even when the culture is put in place, which it is in Baltimore, you can only ride that established culture for so long without sort of like taking control yourself. And I think super hard to say how long that is. A couple of years, something, I don't know. But it's something they will have to do eventually.
I think we can say the first adversity, there's a need to address that kind of thing. And maybe that's a consideration here. We're in the honeymoon period in part with these coaches all across the board because we haven't faced the first adversity yet. I mean, there was incredible positive thoughts about Zach Orr when he was brought on originally. I mean, as a player's coach, highly relatable. There were a lot of things we like. I mean, it's not to say that people didn't, fear the fact that Mike Macdonald was lost and that was a significant, possible loss, but Orr had at least trained under Macdonald. Hopefully he was going to keep elements of the same system, and it didn't work out as well. I mean, obviously it didn't work out as well, but the first adversity will be, in a lot of ways, the first test.
Yeah, I think there will be a huge give us a huge glimpse into how he'll be as a head coach. And I mean, that adversity can be a lot of different things. I mean, it could be an injury, say to Lamar, few weeks of rallying the team anyways, performing anyways. It could also be some type of mutiny is a strong word, but I mean, it could be some type of inner conflict where he just have to take control of the situation and actually guide the team through it. It could be a losing streak, say 2, 3, even 4 games in a row. I mean, that's for Baltimore Ravens standard, that's a crisis, given the team we have. So I think that will tell us a lot about him as a character, as a coach. It's also interesting because I also thought about this during his previous tenures. He hasn't really faced adversity. And the interesting thing is when you listen to NFL scouts, especially leading up to the draft, a lot of what they focus on as far as character, personality and character is like overcome adversity when it comes to the players. This shows character, this shows ability to lead others, to deal with future adversity. And with Jesse Minter, personally, he may have had adversities we don't know of. Professionally, he may have had things that we do not know of, but at least publicly, it's been, relatively speaking, quite a smooth ride for him. So, and now there is a gigantic task of standing in front of the Baltimore Ravens and handling adversities on the biggest stage. So, yeah, it'll be something to look out for sure.
Is there a defining characteristic, or is there something about Jesse Minter that you think might make or break him as a head coach in terms of style, in terms of leadership, whatever it might be?
Fantastic question. Putting me on the spot for it. I think I think a little bit, as I said, I think his ability to, funnily enough, actually to make the reciprocal and to throw it back at him, his ability to become a leader when the leader is needed the most, to throw things back at him, in all honesty. No, but I'd say so, because of course, you cannot go into an established team and you cannot demand the respect and you cannot demand your role. You just have to do it, as it's called, the humility paradox in social psychology. But that humility breeds leadership. And I think he does a terrific job of that. I think sometimes it can be perceived as not a weakness per se, but I think, at least for me, I would like to see a little bit more leadership quite early on, and not only this like friendly banter and smiling kind banter, but hopefully he's just building up for it and he's gaining momentum so that he'll step up to the plate when it's needed. Yeah.
All right. Rasmus, absolutely outstanding. I appreciate you spending about 25, 30 minutes with us today. Great stuff and great thoughts about Jesse. And again, very positive on the hire. You just have some questions that have come out from what you've seen in the interviews, and I appreciate the amount of research you did to get ready for this.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a fascinating process. There's a lot of things to dive into, but it's a fascinating process. But I really like him. It's the best one we could have had. I was absolutely sure they would have gotten him. They would got him from the start, like it was a clear favorite, and I'm very glad that they chose him over candidates that some people were speculating online, and I would have been miserable today if that would have went through.
Based on what you've seen from Declan Doyle so far, who was apparently a candidate at one point, would you have been real negative on him as opposed to Minter?
Half jokingly, as I've expressed prior, this is half joke, half serious. To fire Minter and promote Doyle to head coach. Again, tongue in cheek, I am so deeply impressed by Declan Doyle. as a coach, as a person, as a communicator, as a teacher, as an offensive coordinator, as a mind in every single way. I think Declan Doyle exemplifies and displays everything you want in a head coach. I know this is very premature to say. I will also say I'm not one to easily scream for a new head coach at all. I only wanted one over Harbaugh during his 18 years, and that was Mike Macdonald. I think Mike Macdonald was from day one visible that, okay, this is an incredible coach. I think the same can be said about Declan Doyle, in all honesty.
So the Ravens obviously did not move to make this happen, and they had Doyle on their interview list during the process. And I think part of having him there was that they probably envisioned him as an offensive coordinator. Obviously, lots of criticism that he's never been a play caller before. Most of that already has evaporated in the warmth of a couple of interviews that he's done, where he's looked, he's very impressive. That's for certain. At the podium, he's extremely impressive. He gives great answers to the questions. We still haven't seen what his offense looks like. And I think people might be jumping the gun a little bit in really saying that. But I can understand why people want it. And by the way, any kind of opportunity to hire Declan Doyle as a head coach is completely gone as of this moment. Jesse Minter will have this job for 4, 5, 6 years, and almost certainly Doyle will be lost in that time to some higher level job at another team.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think it would be hard to, given he has no real experience with that, I think it would be hard to assemble a coaching staff, assistants under Doyle. I think it's way easier with Jesse Minter as a head coach. So of course they hire him, and I'm not opposed to that at all. I just think it's very clear that the Declan Doyle has a very bright future.
Yeah. All right. Well, we all agree on that, of course. Rasmus, tell folks where they can talk football with you online if they want to contact you, have a question, or tag you in on a conversation.
I haven't spent much time on Twitter these past few years. In all honesty, it got a bit toxic with the Harbaugh firing, I felt, so I took a pause from that. In all honesty, but I'll have you link my Twitter handle when you upload the episode.
Okay, I'll do that.
People find it there.
I appreciate you, Rasmus. Thanks for coming on. Other folks out there, please continue to use #FilmStudy Mailbag for your questions. I'll direct them to the proper show. If you have a short, this is your time. I'd love to talk to you. Rasmus just came out, contacted me, and within a very short period of time, we're already talking here, despite a very difficult travel schedule to find actual time to record. It's been relatively fast in terms of the turnaround, and absolutely terrific content. Rasmus, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Ken.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.